Okay, welcome back. Now we're going to continue on. In this tutorial, we're going to cover the C language. Now I'm going to introduce some concepts in the C language, and also these concepts are pretty much the same across all languages. So by learning this, you are learning it across the board, irrespective of whichever language you want to code in. But we're going to start with the C language. Now, C programming is very easy. You start it off you can write it off in Notepad or any Word document, and you can save it as a .c extension. So the file, you'll put a file name followed by the extension C. Now, to start the code for C programming, I haven't covered the compiler yet. I haven't discussed that. We're going to discuss that once we get on the computer. But just bear with me. We're going to write a code here, and then we're going to go through it later on. So to start the file, first of all, we start with something called include. And we open a less than sign and greater than, and we put between here stdio.h. Now what that is, stdio, it's got already predefined functions that allow us to write to the screen to take data from the keyboard. So once a user enters their name or age or any, punch in any value, it captures that information. So the I/O stands for input and output. So standard input and output header file. The header file is a library file. So it's a collection of these functions that are predefined. Don't worry if you're lost at the moment and you don't understand what function means or what a header file is, whatever. We're going to explain in more depth in later lessons. But for now, just keep on watching. It's going to get better. So we're going to start with include stdio.h, and then what I'm going to also introduce here as well is what's known as variables. Now what variables are containers. So if you imagine a box, inside that box would hold something. So it would hold an object of some sort. So it would hold a box of pens. Okay? In this case, in programming, we have different types of boxes, and we need to actually define what that box is going to hold. So is it going to hold a number? Is it going to hold characters, words? Is it going to hold, what is it going to hold? Okay, and also in the numbers type, there's different types. There's a whole number, there's a float number, decimal points. So we need to also explain what type of number it is and how long the number is as well. So we have something called int, which stands for integer, and int is basically whole numbers like 1, 2, 3. Yeah? We have something called float. Okay? Floats are decimal points. If you think of money, £10.99, so we are putting in 1.99. Okay? We have something called char, which is a character like A, B, C. Okay? We have other types. Right? We have string, we can keep on going. We have something called double, which is basically double the size of decimal points, 10 decimal points instead of 6 or 8. Can't remember exactly, to be honest with you, but so there's so many different types of data that box can hold, and we need to define that box. The way to do that is by putting the type. So with this integer, int, okay, and then we're going to use a character of some sort. So we can put x. I'm going to put x here. Okay, so basically what I'm saying is x is a type of int, and then we're going to assign a value to x, or we don't have to at this moment in time. We don't have to. To close it off, we put a semicolon. That semicolon, we use it in pretty much most of the languages. So you'll see that's common. Every time we finish a line, we end with a semicolon. So here we've just basically said that x is a type integer. So it's going to hold a whole number. Right. Next, we're going to say that x equals 1. And we're going to close it off. So now we've assigned a value into x. We could have done it all in one line, such as this. Int x equals 1. So we could have done that. But what we decided to do is to do it across 2 lines. So at least you've got the 2 different options here. Okay? And that also is useful because we can actually assign a figure, a value in x later on in the program. However, for the moment, we introduce the concept of variables. Don't worry if you didn't pick it up at this stage, because we are going to explain this all over again once we get onto the computer with real life examples as well. The next thing that we want to bear in mind here is we want to print something to the screen. Remember what I said about stdio? It gives us functions to print to the screen and to capture data from the keyboard, input and output. So likewise in C language we have something called printf. So we're going to print something to the screen. Okay, that's all in one word. All as one word, and we're going to put in brackets, and we can put x. Because that's a variable, we don't need to put any quotation marks around it. It will make sense later on once we get onto the computer. And we just close it off within the brackets and we say on. So it will print the value on the screen 1. So that the output will be basically 1. That's what's going to come out once we do this. And once we finish, we close off completely. Now, that is not the full syntax of C. I've just basically discussed the concept behind it. So you've assigned the value here and we've printed it on the screen. There are other parts that are missing to this code here that I haven't gone through, which is the main body. I haven't added the main here. What would actually happen is that we would, in here, we could put int main. Okay. Now, int main is the main body of the program. So if you think of as soon as you run the program, the first block that the compiler would look at, or as the program executes, the computer will look at the main body. So you look in this section and we'll start running the codes between the main here. And I'm going to go into more detail over the main in another lesson. But for now, I'm just going to stop here and we're going to go on to the next lesson. Okay, in the previous lesson we spoke a lot about the theory of programming in C. We didn't write the syntax correctly 100%, and for the reason is because I wanted to explain to you the basic concepts. I'm not writing the syntax correctly just yet. I'm just going through the basic concept. First, we're importing a file, a library file, which has some sort of detail of how to deal with information being fed to the computer and also how the computer would output information to the screen. But what I am going to do is I'm going to write the syntax now correctly and then start to, you know, push it in more clearly to you. We're going to start with something, a hash initially. This is how you include a file or a library file, header file in this case. We use the hash symbol and we put include and we put the less than sign stdio dot h. We have to include that. So now we've included the library. The next part we're going to do, like I said, we're going to assign a variable which is called integer x, and we're going to close it off, and then we're going to give x equals to 1. Right? Next we're going to have int type main. Now I said this is the main block where the program is going to look once it starts to run. So it's going to execute something here, and we're going to open it with a squiggly line, just like that. Okay, this is very common as well in PHP, in C#, Objective-C, old language in fact I know of. Java, same kind of idea. Every time we open a block, a function or a procedure, we do that. And now what we're going to do, we're going to actually print the value x. So like I explained in the previous lesson, we're going to put print f, and then we're going to put x. Close it off, and that's that. And once we finish the block, we close off the block with another squiggly line, which is a closing brace. Okay, so that is pretty much the program. There's one little thing that this program is going to cause an error. It's going to cause an error because now it's looking for an integer value to be given back to it, and we haven't done that. So what we're going to do, we're going to cross this part out, ignore that. We're going to put return 0. If we don't do that, it's expecting from that function that it's going to get a value back. So if we don't give it 0, it's going to cause an error, which you will do. We'll do an example on the computer soon. So if we don't do that, it's going to cause an error. That's why we have to put return 0. So it's going to return a 0 to the main function. And now we can close, and that's the end of the short program. It's going to print x to the screen as it returns 0 to the main function. So here you can see the code correctly written out in the correct syntax as well. So that's pretty much it for this lesson, but in the next lesson we're going to go onto the computer and we're going to start writing some code. We're going to go over the same concepts again, variables and the printing.